Howdy. Today I'm going to stray a little bit from stock making and go back to what I did for a living, which one of the things I did was I restored and repaired antiques, and I build antique reproductions as well. But for many years of my life, in the 80s, I repaired antiques. I worked for dealers and individuals that antiques were just hot. I mean, if you had a bucket of dirt, if it was old, it'd sell. And so I did a lot of antique work, and a lot of people, or a fair number of people, still call me to repair their antiques. This little nightstand belongs to a dear friend of my wife's, and it's got the typical problem that anything that has drawers has, and that's the drawers are worn out and reconditioned. They need reconditioning. So I thought I'd just, if somebody can benefit from this, if you have some fairly decent woodworking skills, you can do this. It's just knowing the tricks of how to do it. So I'm going to show you how to recondition drawers on an old piece. Now these drawers are really in need of some TLC. The stops are messed up. They go in too far. See, it should stop out here even with the case, but it goes in too far, and that's because the stops are worn out or gone. You can put stops on the top where they catch against here, or you can put them on the bottom down here where they catch against here, the back side of the drawer front. The tracks are worn out. This has got the original tracks in it, best of my knowledge. And so what happens is the drawer sides get dipped out, and then when you go to close the drawer, it hangs. See, it thumps. What's happening is the bottom of the front is hanging on the case, on the front stile or rail, because the sides right here are worn out. So to replace these sides, usually drawer sides on most antiques, most of the time they're poplar, but they're really old poplar, so they've turned green, and they never put any finish on these things. But what happens is they get scuffed and skinned up on the side and on the bottom, and they wear out and they dip. If you look down the bottom of this thing, you can see that this is dipped out right in here, and this needs to stick down further than the front. If you get the side sticking down about 1/8 of an inch, and when I add to this, I'll go even more than that, and then I'll plane it off. I'll cut off what I don't need, but I'm gonna shear off the bottom of these drawer sides and replace it with a piece of poplar, preferably old poplar. That's just half of the fix. Rebuild the sides. All right, I'm going to resurface the bottom of this drawer side. I'm going to take it off. I'm going to shear it off straight, because right now it's dipped here and it's dipped here. It's kind of an S curve. The top of this thing is pretty straight, so I'm going to run the top of it against my fence on my table saw, and this needs to be about 6 3/4. Right now it's less than 5/8. I'm going to add enough. I'm going to add about 3/16. Actually, I'm going to add more than that. I'm going to add enough to make it down to about 6 13/16. And what I'm doing is checking to make sure when I shear this off, I don't want to get into the drawer bottom, which is in a groove inside the drawer side. I'm going to just take off enough to get where I can clean up all of the crookedness, make it straight, and then bring it up to where this front starts. I'm not going to cut into the front. Now, if the front and the top of the front and the top of the drawer side are even, you can do this with it intact. If it's not, these dovetails right here, you just need to just pop them out. You can take a mallet and just tap them out. Usually these things are not nailed. The only nail that's in this is right here, holding the drawer bottom onto the back. And this is an old square nail. This thing is, I don't know how old these antiques are. They're probably from the early 1900s. So it's about 100 years old. And they used old square cut nails for that, handmade nails. So I'm going to shear this thing off at 6 1/2. Now this is a Biesmeyer fence, and you can put it on either side of the blade. A lot of these good quality fences you can do that with. One thing you have to watch about doing that is now and then, if one of these little, if this thing splits, if the side gets a split in it, someone will put a nail down through there, and you don't want to saw that nail off. All right, now because this is a circular saw, there's a little tab right here that you got to just take a chisel. See where it left that little curved little bitty triangle? Just take a chisel and clean that off. Alright, now you're going to take a piece of poplar, and if poplar, the older it is, the greener it gets. You can look down this and see where the sapwood and the heartwood have a line. I don't know if you can see it clearly or not, but you can see how this part from here over is green and this kind of beige. This is the heartwood and the sapwood, and poplar, the heartwood will turn green, almost like a avocado or even an army green. If it's really old, it'll really be dark green. And so poplar, this is, I don't know how, I cut my own lumber, I don't know how old it is, but it's old enough to where it'll match that pretty good. So I'm gonna cut a piece that's gonna extend me about 1/8 of an inch below the front of this, the bottom of this front. Now I'm going to plane some of this off after I get it glued on there and it's dry. I'll plane enough of it off to make it. This bottom needs to sit up off of the case, oh, 1/16 of an inch at least. Now I'm going to rip the width of it down because it's a lot wider than this drawer side, and I'm going to take enough to have an overhang where I can trim it off, but I'm going to cut it down some anyway. So the piece I've made, this is like retreading a tire. The piece I have made is wider than the drawer side is thick. It's taller than what I need so I can plane it down, and it's longer than what I need. It's sticking out back here on this back end. And I'll cut that off after I get it glued on. I'll even it up pretty much on the inside, and I can plane off the outside. I'm going to pad the top of this drawer side with a stick so that I can clamp against that and not put any clamp marks on this 100-year-old wood. If evolution was all they said it's cracked up to be, woodworkers would have grown a third hand by now. Just letting you know. I'm going to let this thing sit here and dry. I'm going to attack the drawer slides, the other part of the equation. Now the drawer slide is this portion. This part guides the drawer left and right. This part holds it up. You can see how this thing is dipped out. Can you see how that's dipped out where the drawer's been sliding on it for 100 years? What I do is I take, now this has got a tongue and groove that goes into a groove on the back side of this rail, and the tongue sticks out of the drawer slide. The guide is glued down, just glued to it. Underneath it, if you can see this on this other side or not, the sun's coming in here at a nice angle. Underneath this is a glue block right there and right there. This one glues to the front of the case as well as the side. This one simply glues to this side panel. And the back of this thing is cut on a 45-degree angle so you can put a nail from here into here. Just drive a nail straight into it, and there's an old cut nail in there, an old square nail. What I do, because the top of this thing is dipped out, I'll pull this off, take all my blocks off, clean the glue off of them, use the same blocks again, and flip this one over to the other side. When I bring the groove side on the left, when I flip it over, it becomes, the bottom is now up, and flip this one over to this side, and now the bottom of it's up. It's not dipped out on the bottom, it's just dipped out on top. So you're using the same wood to restore this thing. You're not using brand new wood, and you don't want to use nail guns, Phillips head screws, and things like that. Antique dealers, you want to drive them over the edge, put a Phillips head screw in their piece. So I'm going to knock this off here. This is probably horsehide glue, and it's brittle. It's a chemical. It has a half-life just like any other chemical, and it will give way when you use a wedge like a chisel, an old chisel or something, and just tap it lightly and put a little pressure on it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do some tapping. I don't know if I can tap and put pressure with one hand while I'm trying to film at the same time, but I think I just did. Alright, what I did, I just took a little bitty pry bar. I've got this thing sharpened almost to a knife edge on both ends where I can slip it into tight places. Now this tongue and groove up here, come on sunlight, I can't see it because it's in the shadow, but see that tongue? That goes into the groove on the back side of this front rail right here. These are your stiles, vertical. Rails are horizontal, just like a rail on a rail fence.